morning, everyone, and thank you so much for that wonderful way to begin. I'm going to ask Rick Stollmeyer to come up here. Oh, there he is. And to have a seat right here in what I'm calling the hot seat.
All right.
So, those of you who might not know Rick, and maybe I can start with talking about the title of this session, which is From the Garage to the New York Stock Exchange.
Slight correction, it actually was the NASDAQ.
Oh,
although it makes a little difference. It's the same
my
thing.
gosh, NASDAQ. And I made another mistake yesterday when I said that when you were purchased back, it was 1.8 billion, and I realized it was 1.9.
Yes.
My apologies. That is kind of a difference, isn't it?
Well, not much, but
Not much. Well,
yeah.
we might think otherwise. So, Rick, I'm going to ask you a question that I know you have asked a lot of people that you've interviewed, because I did attend your conference a few months ago. And the question is, take us back to when you were 12 years old and you're sitting at your dinner table, and just tell us what's going on there. Where were you? Who's there? And what was your life like?
Well, I came from a family of small business owners. My grandfather, my dad, ultimately 3 of my 4 brothers. And when I was 12 years old, my dad and my mom were engaged heavily in the operation of their small retail business. It was a lighting fixture store. And so we had a close family. By the time I was 12, my next closest brother was 19. So I had the benefit of being in a huge family, but also being an only child in effect. And so that scene would probably have been me, my mom, my dad, and maybe one of my brothers and a couple of dogs. And lots of conversation about what's happening in the business, what's happening in our lives. It was a good scene. I'm very fortunate. I had a really happy childhood.
And so let's fast forward to the garage.
Yeah.
Tell us about the garage, and how old were you, and what ideas came up, and then you went into the garage, or you were in the garage when you had ideas that turned out
So
to be
I came
really
from this entrepreneurial family, but my experience of being a business owner was rough as a kid. Even though I had this great upbringing, the business itself was constantly cyclical. It was up and down. We'd be flush one year, mom and dad would buy a new car, and next year, a couple of years later, things aren't quite so good anymore, and well, we don't need 2 cars. And so I grew up with this kind of underlying economic anxiety, and so as a result, when I was looking at universities, I chose the U.S. Naval Academy, which is a great university in the United States, but also completely paid for by Uncle Sam. And I did that so I would not be a burden on my parents. So I became a naval officer. I served on U.S. submarines. By the way, watching those pictures of Hong Kong is emotional for me because as a naval officer, I visited Hong Kong in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s many, many times. And I have great feeling for and empathy for those people and what they're going through right now. And I wish them all the very best. Yes. There's this juxtaposition of the hunger for the freedoms that they enjoy, which are special and different from the rest of China, and of course the inescapable truth that it is part of China. And so our greatest hope is that resolves itself in as peaceful and satisfactory way as possible. So after 6 years active duty Navy, I went into a corporate career that didn't make much sense to me, and then an old friend from high school was writing software for yoga, Pilates, and spinning studios. I'd get to your question eventually. And he taught me about this industry, which was the emergence of the boutique wellness movement. And the epicenters were the major metros, like most importantly, LA, San Francisco, New York is where it was happening in America. And he taught me that they were doing something wholly different from the classic old school health clubs, that they were creating community. And by the way, that's something I want to weave into the discussion yesterday. I'm really excited about the new report, but I think there was something missing yesterday in that presentation, and that is when you go to a yoga, a Pilates, a spinning, a high-intensity interval training class, it's not just about physical fitness. It's about forming social bonds. It's about discovering your tribe. It's about a sense of emotional well-being. And I think that's very difficult to achieve on your own. So they're addressing multiple dimensions of wellness. But anyway, I fell in love with this industry and found that it was being created by these grassroots entrepreneurs and that no one else had built a software package that could meet their needs. And my crazy friend from high school had built one on his own. And so in the fall of 2000, we decided to launch Mindbody from my garage in his kitchen in Glendale, California. I was in San Luis Obispo. And so I found myself from this relatively successful career, I was 34 years old, in engineering, to now running a yoga software company, and it made total sense.
Fantastic, and and so that's the garage part.
Yeah.
And so just, for some of those here who don't know, tell us about what happened in February this year.
So we did take the company public in June of 2015, and in February of this year, we went private again. And the reason was that we found that the board of directors and I, the previous public board, determined that we could better further Mindbody's future by being private again. And that's that $1.9 billion. So the way it works in a publicly traded company is if there's somebody that wants to buy that entire company, then they put forward an offer. And that offer would generally be significantly more than the company's trading for on that particular time. And it was 60% greater than we were trading for.
Wow.
So when we were considering this offer, number one, I felt, well, what's the right thing for our shareholders? That's our job in a public company and a private company. But also, what was going to foster a better future for Mindbody? And the track record of Vista Equity Partners, the people who bought us, was that they invest in great growth companies, companies that have huge addressable markets, and that if they are tuned up a bit and run a little bit more effectively, that they could become much more valuable. That's basically their playbook. And they have a set of best practices that they apply. And of course, as we in this room all know, this is a gigantic market. I mean, how can you even wrap your head around $4.5 trillion? It's really quite profound. So they believed in our future. They made a very compelling offer, and the board and I voted to take it. And we went private on February 14th. By the way, we announced the deal on Christmas Eve, and we closed the deal on Valentine's Day. I think that's significant.
That's a record, I would think.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Just tell us very quickly, the person who purchased that from Vista Equity,
Yeah.
Because he's been in the news
Yeah.
or something that I think it would be interesting for people to know about.
Yeah, his name is Robert F. Smith. Look him up. He's a really amazing individual. He was the son of two school teachers. He had become a chemical engineer, and then after that had found himself in the investment banking world, realized three things. Number one, that software was going to transform the world. This was in the 90s. Number two, that the best way to create value in this space was actually to bring together different companies. And number three, that most software companies aren't particularly well run. And as a guy who created a software company in my garage, I can agree with that, because software is such a powerful thing. It's like fusion. It's incredible energy in software and release of value. And so most software companies that are successful go from very small to very big fast. And you have all the effects of that. It's like a child growing up too quickly. And so with those three realizations, he started this fund with his co-founders in 2001, coincidentally the same time we started. And they have owned over 300 different software companies. They presently own about 65. So Robert Smith just recently made the headlines. He's a very low-key billionaire. In fact, he's the wealthiest African American in the world. And he gave the commencement speech at Morehouse College and paid off the student debt of all of the graduating class. And got a headline, yeah.
Some of you might have read about that, and I thought that was extraordinary.
Yes, and it was his way of highlighting a serious problem in the U.S. The U.S., I think it's our next debt crisis, and that is student loans. It's some crazy number that also has $1 trillion behind it. And we're going to have to resolve it. I don't know how that's going in other countries, but in the U.S., it's a serious problem. And his point there, in addition to changing the lives of of several hundred graduates and their parents was to highlight an issue. If we're going to further our world and accomplish what we need to do and solve all of our problems, well, we need to be educating young people. And a young 20-something graduating from university with crippling debt is not the answer.
Well, he certainly got a lot of attention for it, which
Yeah.
was fantastic. I want to just go back and mention something that I learned from you, because we've known each other for a while.
Yeah.
And that is that you were a Navy SEAL.
No, I was not a submariner. But there was somebody who said that. There was an article where it was a headline, Navy SEAL. For those who know the difference, submariners, like, we're kind of in our heads. We're kind of nerdy, geeky kind of people. And SEALs are just serious badasses, right? So I'm flattered that anybody thinks I'm in that category.
Well,
But for the record, I was not a SEAL. Yeah.
But it was written, so I did read it somewhere.
That's right.
I have to be careful
I
where
think
I'm
we should
reading.
just let the rumor continue, because
Yeah,
I was
okay.
secretly a SEAL in my dreams.
Navy
Yeah.
submariner. Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, because one thing I learned about your company is that you're very much one of those people that was very much about your mission and your values.
Yes.
Because when you talk about it often. So give us a short version of what you tell people about this whole process of mission and values.
So first of all, what Mindbody does is we are a technology platform that helps power wellness businesses. So we're talking fitness studios, gyms, clubs, but also salons, spas, integrative health centers, the kind of businesses we're talking about here this week. And so it's a cloud-based platform. That means that it's software that's delivered through web and mobile devices. It's way more complicated than anybody outside of our business thinks. I like to tell people I was a nuclear submarine officer, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done, and it is. It's really hard. And there's several people in the audience, by the way, that have also built great companies that serve this industry with software, and you guys all know how hard this is. So our purpose, and a unifying purpose that really drives everything we do, is that we are helping people live healthier, happier lives by connecting the world to wellness. So how do we do that? Well, number one is by helping the success of the small businesses, generally small businesses we serve, although we do serve some big brands, like Pure Yoga is running on us today, and Orange Theory Fitness runs on us, Bar 3 runs on us, many different spinning brands, and of course, Core Power Yoga, Yoga Works, and lots of brands like that. But we help them get control of their businesses. And then we have a consumer marketplace. We have an app called the Mindbody app. It's a little thing. You can download that app and find 4.5 million different classes and appointments held each day by our customers. Over the last 20 years, this has been a consistent truth. Less than half of all the available classes and appointments that these wellness businesses offer every day are actually sold. So the rest of them spoil unused. And a key part of our mission of connecting the world to wellness doesn't mean connecting the world to wellness, because we're all kind of clannish and we all understand each other. But there's a much broader world, as your team discussed yesterday at the GWI data, that isn't engaged with this. So we want to broaden that. We want to democratize it. We want to lower the cost for people that are on fixed incomes or lower income. We think there's multiple solutions to that, and part of it is if there's a class with spin bikes in it and only half the bikes are sold, well, it would benefit the studio owner, and of course it would benefit dozens of other people to actually be able to get into that class for a lot less. And you could do that with a system called dynamic pricing. So that's part of what we've built. Our core values are, number one, that we're committed to wellness. We're committed to the 7 dimensions of wellness, as well as to the wellness industry. Number 2, that we're humble and helpful. Number 3, we call it audaciously achieving. So people on our team are people that just wake up with enormous energy, wanting to accomplish difficult things. Number 4 is that we're empathetic. We really work hard to stay connected to our customers and to the people that we serve, to understand their point of view. And lastly, that we're consciously evolving, that the technology, the manifestations of the software are going to change. In fact, the change we've had in the last 5 years, the next 5 years will be many times that. But so how we address that software has to be continuously upping and improving our game. That's been part of our secret.
And when you established and kind of made concrete your mission and values, what year was that? Was that in the garage?
We didn't write down the values and the mission until we were in the Inc. 500. Inc. 500 is the fastest growing companies in America, honored by Inc. magazine every year. And so we were in it several years. And the second year we went, I think that was 2009, Tony Hsieh spoke from Zappos. And he said, if your core values aren't written down, if they aren't actionable, meaning you hire on core values, and if necessary, you'll let someone go over core values. And if they aren't authentic to who you really are, then they don't mean anything. So on the plane trip home, I started jotting down ideas, and then I pulled together a core team of Mindbody. At that point, it was a couple dozen people that had been there for many years, and we formed our core values.
Well, it's very admirable, and I have two more things. One is I want to introduce your wife, and I assume she's here.
She's
Jill,
right there.
Would you mind standing up?
There's Jill.
This is Jill Stollmeyer. I think it's very important to know and to acknowledge that, you're not all by yourself. And Jill, I know, has been by your side and is even part of the business. So just give us, a little bit about Jill.
Well, Jill and I met at work. So, it was controversial. No, actually, back then it wasn't controversial. Today, I'm not sure it would have been possible. But we met at work, and we shared the same set of values. She was utterly committed to creating her own wellness business. So if you look at her name badge, it's East Wellbeing and Tea. It's a wellness spa in San Luis Obispo that we are technically partners in. And luckily, she's using our software, because it'd be really awkward if she wasn't.
I think that would have been very awkward, yes.
Yeah, and she's also doing a marketing work for Mindbody as well. So she's here with both hats on at the Wellness Summit.
Thank you for being here, Jill. I want to ask you about mistakes, because we look at some...
Long list.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just, give us a couple, because, there's a tendency to look at your success and think it was just a garage to, 1.9 billion. So give us a couple mistakes we might be able to learn from.
Well, I'll start at inception. So remember this best friend of mine that had written the software? He and I launched together into this partnership, but we don't work out all the elements of our partnership. We don't decide exactly what the roles and responsibilities are, what happens if one person gets tired of it and wants to leave, and it led to some really difficult moments for us. We ultimately reconciled and figured it out, but that was out of the gate. I always say lawyers are like dentists. And so you either get your preventive care and your checkups and your cleanings, or you're going to get a root canal later. And so that's number one, okay? Number two was when we got out of focus. And so to outsiders, it feels like the wellness industry is very niche-y and small, and what could this possibly be worth? And so we allowed ourselves for a few years to get pulled by some of our investors to get broader. We know how to do scheduling, we know how to do point of sale, we know how to do payments and web booking. What are all the different businesses that we could serve? And long story short, that didn't work, because being tightly focused in a very specific collection of verticals is a key to our success. Number three is, you have this tight band of people. I mean, we literally started in my garage. Before we left, we had 6 people in the garage before my wife finally kicked us out, and we had to go find an office. And we could all finish each other's sentences. We're incredibly closely connected. And then the business started growing. And the demands on the different manager roles became dramatically different. And what you do as a founder is you love these people and you hold on to these relationships. But the truth of the matter is you're not going to make it unless you're willing to change out and bring in management. There's my call. To bring in management capable of managing much more complex businesses. And hopefully that committed member of the original team can lateral into roles that are effective for them. Every once in a while, they make the scaling from a teeny tiny team to managing hundreds of people, but that's really rare. On my part, I got a lot of heart, so I hung on to relationships a bit too long, and it caused a lot of pain in the organization. Ultimately, you're hurting the rest of the organization if you can't make those tough calls.
Rick, thank you for being so transparent.
Thank you.
And and I just want to say that as a community, we are very proud of you for representing the wellness world in a big league. And I think it's also inspiring for us what you've accomplished.
Well,
So-
thank you. I'm proud to be part of this. Hold on a second. And I want to say back to you, Susie, how incredibly proud I am of you. I got to be around you when you guys were making that move from the Global Spa Summit to the Global Wellness Summit and the inception of the Global Wellness Institute, and watching the fabulous success that you guys have had and the impact you're having on the world. How many people cite your research? It's phenomenal. So
Well,
thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you.